Hi, I'm Robert Kuhns from Qigong Project, and in today's video I'm going to explain the difference in the use of the term Dantian in Qigong, martial arts, and internal alchemy meditation. The term Dantian means elixir field. It originated in the Taoist tradition sometime around 2,000 years ago. The idea is meant to describe a location anywhere, either in the physical body or in the universe, where qi, or energy, is stored. So a dantian is a storage point for qi. We'll get into the term qi in another video, but for the time being, let's talk about dantian. So, originally in Taoism, there was no differentiation between ideas like Qigong, internal alchemy, and martial arts. Those differentiations are relatively modern. However, originally, the practice of Taoism was more similar to what we call Qigong in today's terms. What does that mean? It means that in its oldest form, Taoist internal practice involved things like Daoyin, so leading and stretching, Tuna, specialized breathing practices, some which involve inhalation and some which involve exhalation as their main focus, and Cunxiang, visualization, or Zuowang, sitting and forgetting. These early practices were mostly meant to modify the qi of the human body. Originally, Taoists believed that qi was the most essential constructive element of the universe, and therefore, to be able to cultivate qi and master qi could allow one to refine themselves physically and spiritually and ultimately become an immortal. Now, the term immortal has many different definitions, not all of which mean becoming physically immortal, and we'll talk about that in another video. But for the time being, you can know that people originally believed that they should cultivate qi. And the Dantian was a place where qi could collect. Again, it could be inside the body in a certain place, or it could be outside the body. As the term Dantian progressed, it was picked up by various thinkers, including Ge Hong, who is also known as Bao Puzi, the master of embracing simplicity. And he said that there are three Dantian in the human body. There's an upper one, which is in the head, there's a middle one, which is in the chest, and there's a lower one, which is in the lower abdomen. Actually, my prejudice of modern Qigong made me say something which wasn't completely true. According to Ge Hong, the middle Dantian was actually under the xiphoid process, so under the bottom bone of the sternum. So in other words, it goes down into the upper abdomen, which you'll find out in a moment is a very important distinction between the Dantian of Taoism and the Dantian of Qigong. As Taoism progressed, eventually people became more interested in seated meditation as their main method of practice, especially since the Tang Dynasty, when the famous Taoist poet Lu Dongbin became popular. He espoused an internal training method called Jindan, or the Golden Elixir, which by the Song Dynasty, so roughly around the 1000s, was picked up by a thinker named Zhang Boduan, who founded the Neidan, or Internal Alchemy School. This school especially focuses on cultivating qi in what's called the pre-heaven state. The pre-heaven state is a state which is under our regular perception. So we meditate, we enter into a profound state of calm and inner tranquility, and then forget ourselves. And through doing that, and focusing the mind in a certain part of the body, such as the lower abdomen, then it's possible to create some sort of reaction, which is associated with qi, that causes the qi to build up in the body and then to be able to move. So, at that time, when people started to talk about the concept of Dantian, they didn't only do it from the perspective of qi collecting in the body, but they did it from the perspective of the qi of the body transforming into something different through achieving this pre-heaven state. So essentially, in internal alchemy practice, the Dantian is a reservoir for the qi, but it's also a place in which the transformation of the qi takes place. This is a very complex subject, and I would like to talk about it more in other videos. since this is just an introduction to the idea of the Dantian. I also talk about it a lot in the classes that I teach and on my Substack called Immortality Study, so you can check that out if you want. I will link to it in the description. So essentially, in internal alchemy practice, Dantian is a place where qi is collected and a place where qi transforms. Or it could also be a place where spiritual awareness is collected or transformed. And it's the main focal point of internal alchemy practice, with things like the 8 extraordinary meridians, where the qi travels to get from one Dantian to another, being important conduits for the qi, but perhaps less important from the perspective of actually collecting and transforming the energy so that the essence of the body becomes qi, the qi of the body becomes spirit, and of course the spirit of the body becomes void and merges with the Tao. Now, from the perspective of martial arts, let's do martial arts next, because martial arts comes before modern Qigong. It developed for a very, very long time in China, but martial arts practiced in civil society have been popular for the last couple hundred years. In martial arts, people use the term Dantian most often to refer to the lower abdomen and the lower back, or what they call the waist. Dantian in martial arts can have different meanings. For instance, the Dantian in Taiji Chuan practice may be different from the Dantian in Baguazhang or Xinyi Chuan or some other martial arts that use the Dantian concept. Generally speaking, martial arts also are said to have lower, middle, upper Dantian. The lower Dantian being the lower abdomen typically, the middle Dantian being the chest typically, and the upper Dantian being the brain typically. While it is possible to cultivate and develop qi in the internal martial arts, such as Taiji Chuan, Xinyi Chuan, Baguazhang, and perhaps other martial arts that I'm not aware of, it's a fact that this process is not exactly the same as the process in internal alchemy practice, because the transformation of the qi entirely takes place in the post-heaven state. In other words, because martial arts require us to be aware and alert in order that we can practice self-defense, it is impossible to enter into profound apophatic meditation and transform the qi in the pre-heaven state. However, having said that, some martial artists also might like to practice seated meditation, in which case they might practice the pre-heaven state. But this is a preference of the martial artist and not specifically associated with the central reason for practicing martial arts, which is self-defense. Typically, the lower Dantian is especially used in the internal martial arts. The reason is because it's the center of balance of the body, the lower abdomen, and it's also where the basin of the hip is located. And so because we can sink into that area by sinking our bodies downward, by bending our legs and allowing our backs to relax, and by properly moving the waist and the hips along with the inguinal fold, which in Chinese is called the qua, then it's possible to cause movement to be directed through the center of the body so that it emerges to the limbs, such as the hands, with more power. So the real main purpose of the lower Dantian in internal martial arts practice is about generating power by staying centered and by moving around the center in a nimble, powerful, and supported way, which is supported by the legs and allows for the power to come out of the arms and hands in the upper body. So that's the most important role of the Dantian in martial arts. However, you can make various other arguments about the function of the other Dantians as well as the lower Dantian in the martial arts. They could also be considered to be conduits for qi, but that should never become more important in practice than the central methods of martial arts, which involve hard physical practice, the attainment of physical power, speed, agility, flexibility, and eventually soft power, and also the ability to defend oneself if you happen to be attacked. So even though you might experience feelings of qi, and they can be very valuable for training, they're never more important than the main purpose of the martial arts. From that perspective, we should say the main purpose of the Dantian is in generating power and also generating stability. Now, if we look at the concept of the three Dantian from the perspective of Qigong, it's a little bit different. The first thing is, modern Qigong is a little bit hard to tie down. Modern Qigong isn't Taoism. It's not Buddhism. It's not Chinese medicine. and it's not martial arts, but it can be a combination of any part of those practices which pertain to the cultivation of qi in the body. Therefore, sometimes it's a little difficult to actually define terminology across all schools of Qigong. However, broadly speaking, most schools of Qigong agree that the lower Dantian is the lower abdomen, the upper Dantian is the head, and the middle Dantian is the chest. There are some instances, such as in Guilin Qigong, where the location of the middle Dantian might actually be in the lower abdomen, but this is the exception rather than the rule. So, with that in mind, we can broadly say that Qigong thinks about Dantian in a way that's very similar to ancient Taoist practice. This is a place where energy is collected through breathing practices, through meditative practices, and through things like visualization, physical movement, etc., and various combination of those things. Therefore, although certainly modern Qigong practices often do not resemble ancient Taoist practices, there's a consistent historical trajectory and relationship between the two practices. We can train the Dantian in many, many ways using Qigong. You can do stability exercises like you might do in Taiji Chuan, or you can do internal meditation practices very similar to Neidan. On the other hand, you might choose to visualize certain phenomenon within one of the three Dantian or all of the Dantian, or you could do certain kind of movements which attempt to stimulate the Dantian or put intention and movement together. You get the idea. There's really a lot of different stuff that you can do with the three Dantian in Qigong practice, more so really than martial arts or internal alchemy. So you might think that modern Qigong is better for cultivating the Dantian. In my opinion, it's not about which school is better at cultivating the Dantians. It's actually about whether or not you derive the benefit from the school of thought that you practice or from the school you're engaged with. I've practiced Qigong now for about 22 years, and I've practiced internal alchemy for about 12 years. And I can say that definitely the two practices are very different, especially as you begin to become a more advanced practitioner of internal alchemy. The practice becomes less about qi and more about attaining spiritual clarity and realization. Whereas Qigong typically is pretty much about cultivating qi throughout most of the practice. If you want to go beyond it, you really need to practice proper meditation in order to go beyond the qi level. But having said that, the purpose of the Dantian becomes very different if you practice seated meditation or if you practice Qigong for the purposes of cultivating energy. Because generally, in seated meditation, if you want to generate qi, you still have to do it from entering into a state of apophysis and non-being in order for the qi to be generated within that pre-heaven state. On the other hand, for Qigong, you could imagine the qi is in your abdomen, and eventually you'll start to feel qi in your abdomen. It's a very, very different type of practice. Qigong is very good for generating physical sensations, which can relax the body, which can smooth the meridians, which can help the blood circulate better, which can calm your mind. Qigong is good for all of these things. It's also good for things like increasing your proprioceptive awareness, your awareness of things that are outside of your body. And so Qigong can be good for all of those things. Internal alchemy is really good for developing powerful movement of qi deep inside the body, using it to help to profoundly transform your relationship with your own awareness of your mind, your body, your energy, and many, many other things, and to totally change the way that you understand the world in terms of your general perception of the world. So, although they seem to be very similar practices and have a lot of similar ideas, actually, at the end of the day, they're really the opposite. Qigong is about using activity in order to return the mind to a state of calmness and to return the body back to a state of smooth flow of qi and blood, etc. Internal alchemy is really about using stillness in order to generate the movement of energy in order to transform your spirit. Now, in terms of martial arts practice, I've also practiced martial arts for about 22 years. And especially Taiji Chuan, Baguazhang, and Xingyichuan. In any of those schools, I have definitely previously been able to not only feel my Dantian and generate qi there, but also to have the qi move along the body in certain pathways, such as up the spine and down the front of the body. And definitely those practices can do that. But again, it's always in the context of movement. It's always in the context of getting the movements right, making sure that you develop the appropriate strength, making sure you develop dexterity, and so on and so forth. The qi is a spontaneous function of the practice rather than something that you intend on in practice. If you do intend on the qi in practice, usually that means that you're practicing martial qigong. Just like in the previous example I gave, when I said that often people who practice martial arts may also do seated meditation as a additive to their martial arts or in order to benefit their martial arts. But we have to remember that seated meditation itself is not a martial art. However, these practices, such as Qigong, meditation, and martial arts, can be mutually beneficial and mutually reinforcing. And so in that case, when you learn how to properly practice with your Dantian, let's say in meditation practice, it will deeply influence your view of qi, and that can help you to practice Qigong practice better, and also to be able to return the qi back to the Dantian better when you finish practicing Qigong. On the other hand, for martial arts, if you happen to have a very smooth and open body because of practicing Qigong, it may be easier to learn coordinated movements in the martial arts and to be able to sense the qi within those movements, which can in turn make you better at practicing self-defense and being able to master the individual postures of the martial arts, whether by yourself or with an opponent, as well as perhaps understanding a little bit more about human nature so that when you practice with other people, it's easier to perceive what they're trying to do and your responses become better. Hopefully, your practice also spills over into your regular life so that you're not just a Qigong, Neidan, and martial arts practitioner, but you're a person who can live with a worldview which is influenced by the reality of qi, the three Dantians, and also a better perception of what it means to be a human being in the world. Okay, I think I better stop there at the risk of babbling too much. I hope that this video has been useful to you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.